Welcome to Grow with the Flow. Today's guest is Kirby Fling. He's a specialist in trauma and attachment theory and the creator of the two-mind method.
Yes.
Your work has reached hundreds of thousands of people.
Yes.
I think you're closing in on 1,000 episodes on YouTube.
Yes.
By the time this is going live, maybe you're already
Yes.
surpassed that.
Yes. I mean, that's a little skewed because that counts shorts. But for long form content, there's at least 400 videos. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, you've got some videos that are closing in on 1 million views.
Yes.
You have your one-on-one coaching. You have retreats that you organize. There's a book in the making. So tons of ways how you're serving people, how you're helping people to deal with their attachment theory. And, well, you spent several years building this framework, right? And as you can tell, you've done it from your own wreckage,
Yes.
didn't you?
Own wreckage. I like that. Yeah.
So, yeah, Kirby, welcome.
Thank you, Flo. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, I think what I want to start in with directly, after I've been watching a lot of your videos and like just talking to you in person, I've been feeling, you said that it's our wounds that quietly select our partners, right?
Yes.
It's our subconscious gravitating to whoever fits our oldest and most unresolved fears, essentially. And if that is true, why bother? Why bother looking for a partner? Because does being in a relationship even make sense? Or is it literally easier to be alone and where you don't have to compromise, where no one is triggering the things we haven't dealt with, and there's a full space for me to actually heal, so I can just focus on myself rather than being distracted in a relationship?
Good question. Well, the question before that one is, why do you want to be in a relationship? And that's a question that a lot of people don't ask. And I think that core bit, this utter craving we have to be in like a romantic pair bonded relationship, usually monogamous, again emanates from the same thing. It's like we have an attachment system we're born with, and that system, it's like we come out of the womb craving. And the thing that we're craving is this kind of mixture of sensations that I call wanted, chosen, and prioritized. And I use that phrase often. And so it's like, it's baked into not our DNA, but the psychology of the human mind, because that is how we achieve survival. That's how we've achieved survival forever. And so it totally makes sense that we have this baked in craving to have connection, to have community, to have tribe, to have partnership, et cetera, et cetera. And that's kind of what the aspects of attachment theory that I study, or that's the aspect of attachment theory that I kind of focus on, is this element that so many of these things make sense when we look at it through the lens of survival. So why would we want to be in a partnership? And that's a question each person needs to ask themselves. And you're right. For some people, that answer is going to be like, not interested, it's too hard, I don't want to deal with this crap, whatever. But for most of us, our fundamental psychology and like this craving sensation we have inside us is going to say, oh, I want to be in partnership. And so I invite those people, or challenge those people really, you kick their ass, to go ask these hard questions, and say, what is it you're looking for? What are you trying to accomplish here? Because if you're just here to like get some good feels, get laid, feel special, have companionship, so you don't feel alone, to push back the loneliness. That's one answer. But for other people, it's like, no, I actually want to have a long-term relationship that is viable, stable, healthy. It's a good container for raising children, et cetera, right? So,
Yeah, wouldn't you say that it's a little bit difficult to answer that question though, right? Because maybe in many ways it's one of those things that you only realize in hindsight, that, oh, it was nice having lived a life with a partner throughout that allowed me to build a life where we had raised children together, etc., right? Because in many ways there's this, I don't know, let's say a duality, right? Where we grow up and there's this like, well, here's how you're supposed to live your life because that's how we've always done it, right?
Right.
We, like my family and my family's family and ancestors, they all, grew up and they did their thing, and then eventually they started dating, they got married, they had kids, and that's just like a life that has worked, and that's a system that has worked. So we just subscribe to that, and we just do that, because it's very difficult to like say like, oh no, I don't want that life, because you might not know where that comes from. So I feel like, how do you answer that question? Because it's such a trivial question, but also such a massive question in your life. Do you want to have a relationship? Do you want to have children and
Right.
and commit to a life like that? No.
It's a good question. And you're right. That's a hard question. That's one of the reasons I challenge people to ask it, to start by asking that question, because, we come out of the womb not knowing much, right? It's like, basically, there's different arguments on that, but basically there's a lot of things we don't know. There's more things we don't know than we do know, right? That's because that's true all the time. But we come out of the womb not knowing what normal is. So we observe it from around us. So we're like, anytime a child is around a larger attachment figure, they're going to be passively absorbing. I say this all the time. Children passively absorb what they're around. And so if, mom and dad act like this, and they bond like this, and they have fights like this, and they resolve those fights like this, by sleeping in separate rooms or whatever, my little child brain says, oh, that's the way we do it, right? Like, in this kind of stress, we do that kind of action. And so many people are on autopilot, just reenacting these same patterns and the same response, stimulus response kind of cycle. And people will call it generational trauma, which, sure. But so getting back to your question, like, how do we ask this question? How do we even get there to the point where we say, do I want partnership? Well, there's different ways we can investigate that. One of them is we say, what happens when you're not in partnership? What happens when you are by yourself alone on a Friday night? Well, what happens if it's the 6th Friday night? What happens if it's Christmas Eve and it's the 3rd Christmas Eve in sequence, in 3 years in a row? Christmas Eve, you're alone and you see all these people around you. Like, what's happening inside? All of that can be investigated. And people can say, oh, well, all my problems would go away. All these difficult feelings would go away if I just had someone that loved me. And some do. Some of those emotions do go away, but the problems don't go away, right? Whatever's driving that loneliness stays inside. It's just like temporarily suppressed. We see this over and over again, because as soon as you take the person, this partnership, out of the equation, all the negative emotions shoot to the surface again and then completely like destroy their life.
So I wonder, is it possible to work on this then and ask these questions while you're in a relationship?
Yeah, it's hard though.
Yeah.
It's hard. I mean, think about it, that like, if anytime you have a thing, like I use the term numbing agent a lot. It's like the thing that you use to numb out. Anytime you've got a numbing agent nearby, when you're trying to break your addiction to the numbing agent, it's going to be a rough ride, because like your system is so compromised. It's like, oh, I go to Netflix every time I'm feeling bad. I once knew someone that eventually, over many years, all the friends realized that if she was reading Harry Potter books, she was depressed, because that was like
her coping mechanism.
That was her coping mechanism that she went to every time. And it took us years to realize that was the pattern. And then, of course, a lot of people are like, drugs and alcohol. Alcohol's a huge one, blah, blah, blah. But numbing agents, one of the main numbing agents is relationships, is getting a person to come stand next to me, to rub their skin against me, and to whatever, have discussions, to have companionship, whatever. And we don't, how much of that is love and how much of that is addiction? And that's a very interesting question.
Because I assume it's especially complicated if you are in a relationship and let's say you are doing the work on yourself and you're now mid-healing and you suddenly realize, oh, maybe that partner is actually indeed, just a result of the old wound talking.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens now? When you say like, okay, that you actually chose that person for the wrong reason entirely. So now you're in the middle of healing, in the middle of a relationship. And does that mean that, you realize that, oh, that relationship actually triggers this wound, or like you now realize that maybe that relationship isn't very good to start with, right? So there's this fear of like, oh,
Right.
does it mean that I start healing in a relationship and that relationship will then end
Yes.
because of it?
Yes. I see that all the time. I see people that are resistant to, they're resistant to any teaching, modality, whatever, that will bring them to a point of self-awareness. This blows my mind, but it happens, and I see it all the time, is that if the couple is having struggles, and we start investigating where the struggles come from, where the conflict comes from, different fears and potential traumas and stuff that are involved in there, and then we ask one of them, well, what about this aspect of your past or your thinking or whatever? And they'll just say, no, I don't want to see that. I don't want to talk about it. They will divert. It's almost like, la, 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 I don't want to see that. And it's like, wow. The first time I saw that, I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like, it's just, you just watch someone just click the off button on the remote and just tink and they're gone. And that's generally considered dissociation and kind of an avoidance strategy. But what I'm getting at here is that a lot of people will be very resistant to any kind of work that brings them to a point of analyzing themselves, because they don't like they believe they're not going to like what they see, or they already know they don't like what they're going to see.
I think that's it. It's more of the latter, right? Because I feel like many people, they know. I feel like ultimately we all know, right? I mean, I can't talk for anyone else. I can only speak for myself. And
Right.
if I look back at relationships, issues, when it was a job or whatever that, where I wasn't doing well, I knew, what was going on, what was probably the reason. But the moment you start thinking about it, you realize, what if it's, a relationship? Maybe we have an apartment together. So if we break up, we have to sell the house. Oh my God. And then the mortgage. And what if we don't get the same price? And suddenly, there's these domino stones in your mind that would be falling, like, oh, you have to do this and then this. And because it feels so overwhelming, you now, not only do you know that there's an issue that you have, but also the anxiety comes in on how it would feel like to deal with that issue. And ultimately, it's just the ego getting triggered now, because you realize like, oh, your relationship isn't good, and maybe this isn't good, and like something's going wrong. And then you're like, let me deal with this tomorrow. Let me watch Netflix, or let me do gambling, run to whatever these, escape mechanisms and coping mechanisms are. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. It's like when the human mind is in a situation where there's no clear answer, there's usually two things, and it's numbing or violence. And that's, at least that's been my observation, is that I don't like this situation that's happening. And when I say I'm talking about like this is emanating up from my subconscious through the language of emotions, right? So I've got all these like difficult emotions about this situation. I don't like it. It doesn't feel good. I want it to be different. Okay, how? And then you start thinking about different options. It's like, well, I could leave my partner. It's like, and then the brain projects all these, terrible outcomes. No, can't do that. So then they freeze, and they say, well, I could do this. And it's like, no, and so the brain brainstorms a couple of things. They all seem like dead ends, or too hard, or too difficult, or too scared. And then it says, I don't know what to do. And the nervous system literally downregulates. At least I believe it does. The nervous system will downregulate and say, we don't like this situation. We don't know what to do about it. We, meaning subconscious and conscious, or inner child and adult mind. We don't know what to do about it. We don't like it. There's no clear path. So what makes sense is to decrease energy expenditure. Basically go into kind of this state of like emotional hibernation, and you'll see them. They'll just kind of go blah, and their whole nervous system downregulates.
Disassociate entirely.
Right. And then this is what I think is happening, is that the system is saying conserve energy until such time as a solution presents itself. And this is one of the core principles behind the avoidant attachment style. I think it's one of the core principles behind depression. I think it's one of the core principles behind any kind of like low energy, like chronic fatigue, right? This is all hypothetical based upon cross-referencing many things I've researched, but I mean, so, don't take this as at any kind of, I don't know, do your own research. But this theory holds, in very interesting ways when I'm interacting with someone that is dealing with chronic fatigue or depression or anxiety or avoidant partners, or they themselves are avoidant. Is like, okay, something clearly is not jiving with your nervous system. It does not like what's going on. What have you done to give it an answer? And they're like, usually their answer is, I don't know, or nothing, right? Okay, what do you do with your time? It's like, oh, well, I go to the gym. Why? And you're like, okay. Anyone, if you say they go to the gym and you're like, why? And they're like, you're like, okay, the gym's probably functioning as a numbing agent. It's just something I get up and I go do. Or I walk the dog, I go to movies, blah, 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 right? And so what you see is this pattern where they're using these numbing agents to basically suppress this discomfort that is very alive inside their system, this problem that they don't have an answer for.
Yeah, I feel like this is one thing that I specifically noticed in my own journey with my anxiety, right? Where it was incredibly difficult to comprehend what was going on, especially when you start experiencing these crazy moments of anxiety and you don't know what's going on and you can't explain it. And I haven't even learned the vocabulary yet, to express it to my partner. So instead, obviously, like at the time, I would just experience anxiety. I would experience a lot of shame because of it. So I would come into like, isolating myself a lot. And instead of like being able to communicate it or share it and being vulnerable, I would, obviously distance myself from the relationship. And eventually that would lead to the relationship falling apart.
Yeah.
And it's taken me years to understand what's going on, trying all these different methods from, exposure therapy in many ways to acupuncture, to breath work, to whatever, right? But eventually I arrived at a point where I felt, and I mentioned this to you just the other day, is how I kind of shifted how I look at anxiety. Because before, anxiety was the villain, the enemy. I looked at it as something, it was like I would give everything in my life to just not have anxiety. Whereas now I've finally been able to look at anxiety as something that I'm actually really grateful for, because it is actually showing something that needs attention, right? That it's worth looking closer into. And it took me years, right, to get to that point. But I've now realized that the anxiety is obviously just a symptom. And I think everything that you mentioned now, from someone that is, has low energy, fatigue, is depressed, and all of those things, I feel like, in my mind, all those things have in common is that these are all symptoms,
right,
of some underlying stuff. And you're saying that this is essentially these underlying wounds, right? Or fears, the trauma, essentially, that we're
eventually
carrying
get
with
there.
us.
Yeah. I mean, at the first point, it's simply acknowledging that some part of me, this big, complicated, organic mess that is me, some part of that really does not like the reality that's in front of me.
Yeah.
And if we can just start there, we can go, you can go the spiritual route where it's like, I'm going to do whatever meditation and internal work or whatever to be, I'm at peace with reality. That's one angle. Or the other angle is like, I need to change reality, right? And that's kind of more like the violence approach. Violence approach is just like, I don't like what's here. I'm just going to do violent things until it changes. Yes, I totally agree with you. Anxiety is simply, I say it all the time, anxiety is just a fancy name for fear. Fear is simply just an uncomfortable experience. It is an emotion. It is a feeling. It's a sense. Really, it's just an experience. And that's an experience we don't like, right? So we classify it as a negative emotion. We'll say the same with sadness or depression or whatever. Like, we can classify these emotions like these are negative emotions. Negative according to who? I went through all this. I was like massively anxious for a long time and avoidant for a while and suicidal ideation and general anxiety disorder and PTSD and blah, blah, blah. I mean, I was diagnosed with this whole laundry list of diagnoses I got along the way. Those things don't bother me anymore. And people say, well, how did you get there? And I'm like, I know how I got there, but it's not something I can sum up in a TikTok reel, right? There's many aspects of it, and that's what I teach now. And that's kind of the foundation of this whole To My Method deal, which is really just ideas pulled in from other people and kind of wrapped together in ways that have never been wrapped together before. I mean, it's just the integrator, you know.
There's only so much innovation
Yeah.
one can have in a, when with billions of people that have been alive, chances are any idea you had isn't the first one, right?
Exactly.
So sometimes it's like, I noticed that a lot when I started reading books on personal growth and self-help, and even like how to organize your time. I suddenly realized, like, oh, you call it a Pomodoro technique and you call it this and you call it that, and you realize ultimately it's all the same stuff. It's just different people trying to unpack it and wrap it in a different way. And eventually I get like, oh yeah, the way you're saying it works for me, because the way these guys said it like didn't kind of connect with me. I feel like that's what I'm learning now more and more.
Right.
There's only so much truth out there, right? Sometimes it's just like how to unpack it, and you're unpacking it a bit differently, right? You're taking all of these.
Yes, and I mean there are some fundamental differences in the sense that, like, a lot of people complain about traditional talk therapy, whatever. I think the complaint about that is that it is stagnant. It is sitting in a room, and then these other people say, no, talk therapy's totally worthless. Come go with somatic stuff and don't talk about anything, and just move or whatever, right? And that's cool too, but the place where I'm at is like both systems need to be involved. Is that, you can move all day long, but if you don't have any kind of insight into what's going on inside the way that you think of the world and your beliefs and your self-awareness, all that kind of stuff, if you don't have any kind of cognitive rational insight, you don't make progress. And if you don't have any kind of somatic shifting, it's change in the somatic meaning the movement of the body. If you don't have any kind of change in the somatic system, then, and you only have cognitive insight, then you're in this like disconnected state. And so you need to be in this place where both systems are working together, or at least communicating. And if that's not happening, you're going to stay stuck. And back to your point about the emotions and the anxiety and stuff, I just had this retreat a couple of weeks ago, my first time, and it went swimmingly. It was like amazing. But the main theme, like if we talked about many aspects of all the stuff that I teach, but the main theme is don't be terrified of your emotions. It is a negative emotion. It's something we're going to classify as a negative emotion. We're going to give it the title of a negative emotion, but it's really just an experience.
Yeah.
If you go running from that experience, you now have anxiety about your anxiety. You now have fear of being afraid, right? It's like if you are so resistant and fearful of having a negative emotional state, you actually amplify the stress inside your system. Whereas if you can get past that to the point of saying, this is an emotion, the emotion is a signal, it is giving me information about the comfort or pursuit or dreams or whatever, right? It's giving me information about aspects of my psyche that I don't have access to. I frequently call it the subconscious or inner child or seat of emotions. I use all three. It's giving me information about that part of myself. And it's giving to me through the language that it speaks is these like emotional signals. It doesn't speak language. Language lives in a different part of the brain.
Exactly.
And so if I learn to listen to that and translate it and understand that it's like, oh, that's what this emotion is telling me. This is what my preoccupation is telling me. This is what my anxiety is telling me. This is what my depression is telling me. And then I can listen to those signals without freaking out about it. I keep my stress, my cortisol and stress hormones, I keep them lower. And because they're lower, I don't have a full system-wide panic. And because I don't have a system-wide panic, I'm able to act with intention and kind of some structured rationality to how I'm approaching the problem and right? And then it goes on from there.
Yeah, what you mentioned now about that you have to have both the the rational approach, the scientific approach of like understanding what's happening as well as the somatic approach. Because I just came out of a Vipassana retreat, right? And that's exactly what they're talking about as well. Essentially, they're saying that you have to have the wisdom and the technique, let's say, like understanding what it is that you need to do, and but at the same time, and then talking obviously about the concept of impermanence. Whatever we're going through isn't gonna last. Whatever emotion or whatever sensation that comes up in your body is gonna rise and it's gonna pass. And they say we can all learn this. It's all nice and well because we're all familiar with it. Like I think the concept is very easy for all of us to understand that nothing is forever.
Yeah.
Not life itself, no pain that we experience, nothing is forever. Nothing beautiful that we experience is forever either, right? But the beauty in Vipassana is that you sit when you meditate and you try to scan your body to feel the sensations in your body, to exactly feel like, oh, there's some pain. The pain will rise and then will pass. And the same comes with, any nice sensations that you feel. And it's something that I, as difficult as this experience was, obviously, just sitting for 12 days meditating, it's very profound experiencing this in your body, how it feels like, because knowing the concept, understanding that is one thing and it's beautiful, but really feeling it is what you need to really understand and kind of fully comprehend the concept of impermanence, right?
So what happens when you leave the Vipassana retreat and then you like go home for Christmas, with your mother and extended family that have been interacting with you in the same way for dozens of years and triggering you in all those same ways and everything else? And I ask this because I have a couple of clients that did exactly that. It's like they leave Vipassana and then they go straight into the lion's den. And then it's like, oh my God, what's happening? Like, why am I so triggered? And that's a very interesting question for me because I was the same way. I'm like, something's going on here because I can, if, I take this drug or do this meditation or whatever, I can achieve this like state of calm equanimity. How would we say that word?
Equanimity.
Equanimity.
I heard it 1,000 times over the course of 12 days. So.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Yeah, so I can reach this state of like kind of calm, grounded, chill mode. And then it's like, okay, I'm healed or I feel good or whatever. And then I leave that situation, I go into a different situation, and then my system is utterly hijacked.
Yeah, I raised the same question with the teacher in one of the sessions that we had with them, and even the in the discourses, it's kind of referred to that they're saying like Vipassana is not a magic pill, right? It's not something that you do for 12 days and then you're fixed. Obviously, it's something that you're invited to do continuously. Meditate, ideally twice a day for 1 hour in the morning and the evening. And they say that this is something that takes time, right? So there might be situations like Christmas Eve with a family once a year, or as simple as driving a busy road back from home to work, and seeing people cutting you off and noticing how that triggers you. And sometimes these things, leave us startled for hours, sometimes days, right? Now, Vipassana says the technique is sound. It's been around for thousands of years, and the technique helps. So if you practice it correctly, it will help you eventually. And it says that if you just keep practicing, maybe now, instead of being triggered 10 out of 10 Christmases, now it's 9 out of 10 Christmases. Maybe, if you get cut off in traffic and you usually, are completely furious for 4 hours afterwards, now, it's not a 10 out of 10 fury that you experience, but it's an 8 out of 10 or so. It's all nice, and I get that, but part of me also feels like, and obviously I'm just kind of started this path of Vipassana, or the path of Dhamma as they call it, and I'm still kind of figuring out if this is for me, because it's very easy to meditate when you're sitting in a meditation hall for 12 hours a day and there's nothing but birds chirping around you. If you go into the city straight away, like I did, afterwards I was in Hanoi and I now set to meditate, and suddenly there's honking and barking and noise, and suddenly it's like, oh, I cannot meditate so easily. So
Mm-hmm.
right now I'm trying to see how I can integrate this and trying to witness that a little bit. But I'm also impatient. So I'm telling myself, do I want to dedicate my life to a life of meditating? And obviously, like what Vipassana is teaching is sound. It's just living a moral life. It's like you can't argue with it. Everything it teaches is very
Mm-hmm.
sound, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also impatient. So I feel like, well, if there is something like I've experienced, anxiety, depression, these things that I've experienced in the past, they showed me something. So is there maybe a faster way to get to the bottom of those, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like, is it good enough for me to be like, oh, just accept it, and over time, instead of being triggered 10 out of 10 times, it's 8 out of 10 times. I'm not sure that's good enough for me.
Right.
Right.
Right. Right. Yeah, I see that as a question of efficacy
Mm.
in the sense that, if we're trying to, I don't know, I'm trying to move a boulder and, I use a lever arm that's 10 meters long and I can move the boulder an inch. It's like, okay, well, that has that much efficacy. But if I use a different kind of lever arm and a big, steam powered engine or whatever, I can move it, 20 meters. That's higher efficacy. And why am I saying this? Because that is a key bit of how I evaluate these things when I was kind of trying to integrate this into a method, is that like what has high efficacy for bringing meaningful change. Okay, so this kind of goes into this idea that, what is an attachment style? An attachment style, people are going to say, oh, anxious and avoidant and da-da-da-da and secure and disorganized, right? That's the 4-quadrant model. There's other models, but that's the one that's the most popular, right? But those titles are simply a collection, which we were talking about the other day. It's like the title is simply a collection of behavioral responses. If I put you in this particular kind of situation with this kind of attachment figure, your beloved partner or your parent or whatever, if I put you in this situation with that kind of person and we have this kind of fight, how do you respond? And like, oh, you respond like this. It's like, okay, now let's do it 20 times. And like, oh, you respond the same way 20 times. Now we've got this data point, and we do that across many different combinations of situations and attachment styles or attachment figures. And then you end up with this grouping of behavioral responses. They're relatively consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're going to take this big bubble of groupings and we're going to say that is an anxious response pattern. That collection of responses is anxious. This collection of responses is avoidant. But what's motivating the response? Right? The thing that's motivating the response is the fears and emotional survival, the survival mechanisms, the attachment strategies, the emotions, the fears, all this kind of stuff that's underneath the surface. That's what I look at. And because if we can change the fear, if we can dissolve a fear, if we can, demonstrate to the system that this survival mechanism is no longer helpful, et cetera, what happens? We get a different behavioral response in the same situation. Okay? So here you are, Christmas Eve, with your mother or mother-in-law or both, and you're just like, oh, I'm dreading this. I'm going to go and we're going to have this fight, and they have this political view and I've got that political view and blah, 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 whatever. And that has been triggering for years and years and years. And then you have, here's your situation, here's your attachment figure, and here's your response. And it's been that way for 20 years. And now we can put you on a program, like a training routine, like a personal trainer at the gym, but it's an emotional trainer. And we can put you on a training routine, and within 6 months or 9 months or a year, whatever that timeline is, it's usually one of those three, we can train your nervous system not into suppression. It's not we are changing the reaction because we want a different reaction.
Yeah.
We're changing the underlying motive so that reaction doesn't even surface. It's not my reaction surfaces and then I've got this training routine where I push it back down. It's that it doesn't even surface to begin with. Now you've won. And we have successfully changed a response in that particular stimulus and stress. Now let's say we do this across 100 different domains or factors or situations. We've now changed your behavioral responses so thoroughly that you no longer classify as having an anxious attachment. That's the way I look at it. But it's interesting. It gets even more interesting because this whole behavioral response thing applies to many different realities that people would classify as a personality disorder, like OCD, or there's a bunch of them.
Yeah.
Narcissism being the one that everyone's talking about all the time. People say they're like, narcissists can't change. Some can't, but some anxious people can't change either. Or can they? Right? Can we do something? Can we put someone on a training program and support them through that process of training that has a fixed timeline, and at the end of that timeline, they have a meaningful difference in their behavioral response?
Well, I think that's the question that so many different strains or types of psychology and therapy are trying to answer, right? And very similar to what I mentioned earlier about, maybe different methods to, be more organized, like the Pomodoro technique.
Right.
Now the question is like, well, how do I approach my healing, right? Which is the right, path for me? Because what other options are there out there? You have EMDR, you have family constellations, there's CBT, there's somatic work, breath work, there's things like Vipassana, there's other things that look into using psychedelics and some sort of therapy to process those things. So is there an argument to be made that you can say like, well, all of these, lines have a valid point to be there, and one thing might work for one person and another might work for another? And like, how do I get there? Like, what approach do you take, and what's, out of all of these options, like, where do I choose?
Good question. The way I see it is that a lot of people will choose a modality, or they'll gravitate towards some kind of healing thing for, reasons. Why do we do anything? Because we got this motivation, we got this interest, we got this curiosity, whatever. But there's also this whole social media, public persona. Like, we are more exposed now than we've ever been in the history of humanity. And so we see someone doing some cool thing and some cool yoga shala in Bali, and they're flopping around the floor doing whatever, and we're like, oh my God, that's a big deal. I want to do that. And then they rush towards it. And they rush towards it with this idea, thinking the modality is the thing that brings the healing. And it's not. The modality is the thing that challenges your mind and body and heart, if you want to separate those, into a different way of processing. It either introduces new data or brings greater self-awareness or whatever. So the modality brings a challenge to the nervous system and the mind. And then after that, you go through this integrative process where you integrate what you learned and this new material. So the thing not to do is don't go chasing after the next fancy thing, right? Don't go chasing after crystal bowl therapy because you just think, you heard someone on TikTok say, oh, crystal bowls, promise. Oh, they're going to heal this, and they're going to, shatter the trauma molecules in your water or whatever. I don't know. I've just heard all these weird ones. So, and I don't mean to poo-poo any of these modalities, because the way I think it works is I think a given person encounters a particular modality at a time that it just happens to resonate with them. It's like they just got lucky that it worked, right? Or they're deluding themselves, which is the fourth enemy of healing. And so, but then they come out of it, and it really has brought change to their life. And so we want to celebrate that. It's like, okay, if you did crystal bowl therapy and you found meaningful change, show us the meaningful change, tell us about it. Let's have some kind of measurable way of determining that there was some kind of meaningful change.
Almost like a social proof. Right?
Yeah, yeah. Then great, let's celebrate that. So, but that doesn't mean it's going to do the same thing for every person, right? Other people are going to encounter it at different times in their life, and it's not going to line up with what they need at that moment. It's not actually going to bring the insight that they need.
Yeah, this is something that I feel like that keeps coming back to me over the last couple of years since I, started changing a lot of things in my life, from quitting my corporate job to traveling and maybe even starting this podcast, etc. Sometimes I'm feeling so pulled in different directions. And lately, more and more, one thing that becomes more apparent is intention is, I think, the key, and it has to be in kind of the core of everything. Because whatever you do, just try and make sure that you do it intentionally, right? Ask yourself questions. Okay, why do I do EMDR? Or why do I want to go to, a somatic alignment session? Or why do I want to do, whatever other retreat is there, like Vipassana or whatever? Like, just ask yourself why you do it.
Mm-hmm.
Vipassana actually teaches the same thing. On the final day, they say, yeah, you should, meditate, twice a day, and then actually do one retreat a year, etc. You should also serve at one, etc., etc. So they say all of those things, but they also say, but give it a year, and if it doesn't work for you, cool, do whatever you want. Don't mix things, right? Don't do a breathwork meditation and a Vipassana meditation and this meditation and that, and don't do all of those things at the same time. They use this analogy of digging holes in order to get water, and they say, like, well, if you dig a few shovels here and a few shovels there and a few here, well, you're never going to achieve any depth.
Mm-hmm.
So do one thing, commit to it, and do it properly, and that will eventually get you down to find water. Maybe for you it's Vipassana, maybe for you it's this, maybe for you it's that, but start by asking yourself, like, why am I doing it? What's the idea here? And don't just like follow blindly, because some things are just like promoted beautifully on Instagram and TikTok, on wherever.
Right.
But if you're able to just be very intentional in what you do and trust yourself a little bit more in the process, because, well, you've done your research, maybe you've asked yourself, like, what is it that I'm maybe seeking or hoping for? And I feel like it's very similarly with the therapy. Like, well, just choose one thing. Truth is, if you choose whatever that you feel is right for you, that you feel like you're called to, you might find some healing in it. That doesn't mean that the other person will do the same.
Right.
But at least you're being intentional about it, right?
I agree with you, but I want to say that there's some caveats here.
Mm-hmm.
And this is my opinion, but like the caveat here is that, again, too many people are seeking a good feeling. And what I mean by that is that, here I am, I live in Ubud, and all these people come in, and it's like this like spiritual smorgasbord. And I see people coming all the time. It's like, oh, I just want to try this thing, and I want to try that one. It's like, oh, what's breath work like? And what's a Watsu session like? And blah, 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 blah. And that's the digging holes analogy, right?
Yeah.
But, okay, if you get some kind of good sensation from it, great. But again, is there meaningful change? Can we take you to the point of maximum triggeredness with your mom or mother-in-law or girlfriend who's walking out on you? Can we take you to the point of being maximum triggered? And does that little spiritual smorgasbord, your from Ubud thing, do you see a meaningful change? Or do you just keep doing the same thing? And that's a key bit where I'd say that maybe I'm different than the norm, in the sense that I don't tolerate that when I'm working with people. Is that the place, we actually know this from like all sorts of other studies, from, back to Csikszentmihalyi, the flow guy. I can never say his name correctly. But like flow state, the zone of proximal development, where children learn the best. We know all these things. It's this like kind of unstructured play kind of thing. But it is about, that's where children learn the best, is unstructured play. Now we move this into adult healing space, and we know that the place where you are going to make the most advancement in your adaptation or change or healing or whatever you want to call this is the place where you are right at the edge of your comfort zone and a little bit past it. So what I'm saying here is that if I lie down for a sound healing, feeling pretty good about my day, and then these various sound things happen around me and crystal bowls and guitars and whatever else, and then I get up and I'm just like, oh, that's amazing. I feel wonderful now. It's like, at what point did you feel uncomfortable? Well, they didn't, because they're not looking for that. They're looking for more comfort, and they're looking for these moments where they can come out of this healing state, modality or whatever, and be like, oh my God, this is so amazing. And so I can just feel that my soul has changed. I don't buy that anymore. I think that's spiritual bypassing.
I agree with you. I think healing becomes the escape,
Yes.
ironically, right?
Yes.
So instead of healing, you use healing as an escape from,
Right.
really, because we're just looking at the nice feelings, Suddenly it's about completely ignoring all the negatives, right?
Yeah.
Hoping that the trauma will eventually resolve itself automatically. And
Yeah.
I think, interestingly, in one of the conversations you had on your channel, you used this one analogy, this one example of a baby having some need, as babies do, and the mother kind of coming over, listening while on the phone, and kind of like just like reacting like that, right?
Right.
And we can obviously understand how that baby would now feel like, oh, the moment I scream I need something, then my mom comes, she's already distracted, and she's just kind of goes, and she's not interested, and
Right. That
whatever.
little box is more important than I am.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what I was curious about, we hear this so often, how, and again, the concept makes a lot of sense to me, right? So something in my past happened in my childhood, and as a baby or whatever, as an infant, I saw a pattern, and I saw how life, is lived around me, and I accepted that as a norm, and I accepted that as a truth, and that has led to, an impact that it has in the future. So this
Right.
cause and effect, makes a lot of sense to me. But we often hear this, like, oh, how this and this trauma was triggered in our childhood. But I'm curious, like, how are these formed, these wounds, these traumas, right? So if my mother, if she does that once, is that already like, boom, generational trauma imprinted right then and there? Or is it something that would be systemic, like that, oh, chances are, if that little box is more important than you, in one example, that, well, your mother is probably displaying the same signs over and over. So is there, like, how do they start? Is it something that is just like, no, there's probably a mistake that was done continuously throughout the first, I think in a lot of psychology, you talk about the first, 36 months maybe or so,
3
that are like
years,
the
yeah.
most kind of critical. So
Yeah.
all, like, most of your patterns as an adult are probably formed or impacted in those first 3 years, right?
Yes. Yes.
So is it just something like, if my mother, or let's say if I want to be a father, do I have to be worried that if I do one mistake that I'm going to mess up my
No.
sons or daughters' future relationships? Or
No. I mean, it's great that you're asking that question. There is, yeah, a lot of people are worried about this, right? Because they want to be good parents. And it's like, I want to support that 100%, right? It's not that if an attachment rupture, right? So to clarify this, the idea is that, like, the baby's sitting there in the high chair and, eating some kind of porridge or pudding or whatever, and then it gets messy, and now it's like all over my front and my legs, and I'm cold and I'm wet and sticky, and this doesn't feel good anymore, and I don't know what to do about it, and I'm literally trapped, I'm tied to this chair, and it's like, I'm not happy right now. My cognitive brain is not fully developed yet, but my limbic system is. And the limbic system says, cry out, right? Call out for help from my primary attachment figure. Well, mom comes around the corner, she's talking on the phone, and then she does not attune with me during that moment. She doesn't make eye contact. She doesn't, she acts impatient or angry or whatever, right? The baby is literally being like, I'm in a state of panic and profound discomfort. I am seeking help. Come make these uncomfortable feelings go away. And she comes around the corner, and what does she do? She treats me like I'm an annoyance. She treats me like I'm a distraction or whatever. Okay, so now, theoretically, what happens right there is an attachment rupture. Because from the baby's point of view, is that the connection with mother is everything needed for survival and future propagation, thriving. And now that connection was just ruptured because something else is more important than me. She actually came into my presence and she did not attune, she did not connect, she did not support. And so the theory is that that baby's nervous system then says, there is something wrong with me. Why? Because at that stage of the brain development, it is trying to figure out cause and effect relationships. It does not have the brain, that baby brain does not yet have the concept that other people are separate entities and they have their own motives.
Mm-hmm.
That's called theory of mind. That they believe that comes online around age 3. So before theory of mind comes online, baby's trying to figure out cause and effect relationships and says, I just cried and I'm all here covered with sticky chocolate pudding. And then my most important person in this world comes around the corner and then treats me like I'm an annoyance. And that's a rupture. That's what we call an attachment rupture or attachment trauma.
In like a singular moment,
Yes.
that might be the rupture.
Yes,
So you would be able to trace that back to that moment.
Yes, because everything's about survival. So to that baby's nervous system, my survival is now like this is an existential crisis. Because if mom doesn't come back to prioritize me, like if she doesn't move back towards me and take me out of this chair and clean this pudding from me, I'm gonna die. So to that baby's nervous system, this is an existential crisis, and it's worthy of a full-blown system-wide panic. That's an appropriate response. Now, of course, we don't want to guilt those mothers, and it's the hardest job in the world, and I want to support that in every way possible, right? But it's like the belief from attachment theory is that this is the dynamic that's happening, and now your question is like, oh my God, did I just create trauma for life? It's like, no, because there's this other aspect of it, which comes from the Dr. Matt stuff. Dr. Matt's the sleep guy. He's the sleep specialist that goes around all these podcasts.
Yeah.
There's a lot of very strong evidence to support this idea that we integrate our experiences when we're sleeping. And basically, we take things that happen during the day and they're encoded into the deep, permanent memory system when we're sleeping. So that means I can have a traumatic moment in here and now with my chocolate pudding all over me, and then mom can be disconnected, and this is all panicky. And I go, what do I do? I cry, I scream, I do more stuff, right? Eventually, mom puts the phone down. She comes over, she reconnects, she picks me up, she cleans me off, she gives me all the love and cuddles and all that kind of stuff. And now my nervous system just learned, it's like, oh, that one moment of rupture and disconnection is a short period of time because my attachment figure is still here. I'm still wanted, chosen, prioritized, et cetera, et cetera. So what this teaches us is that there's a window for trauma. There's a window in which trauma can be prevented. You can have a traumatic experience, which just means your nervous system went into like extreme overwhelm. You can have a traumatic experience, but if you get adequate support, connection, basically the 5 pillars of attachment, if you get adequate enough of the 5 pillars of attachment before you sleep, that memory will not be encoded as a traumatic memory. So this is one of the most important lessons I learned through all this research, is that like trauma is a very specific psychological experience and it can be prevented. Well, okay, let's say it doesn't get prevented. Well, that just means we need to do additional teaching in additional days. So like if on Monday I learn that chocolate pudding tastes terrible because maybe it was cooked wrong or burned or something, well, and I never experienced chocolate pudding again, the only association I have with chocolate pudding my whole life is going to be that it tastes like burnt milk. Right?
That was my experience with Changu.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But now if I go back on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and I have chocolate pudding, it's the most delicious thing ever, now I've got 4 experiences that say chocolate pudding is great and one that says it tastes like burnt milk. What does my brain do? It puts these two together and says, oh, it can be this and it can be that, but statistically, it's much more likely to be a good thing.
So the advice for upcoming parents is to time the trauma of your child early in the day, right? So you have more time to.
Yeah, sure. Like, ding, like let's do it. No, it's this idea, and this goes to parents, but it also goes to romantic partnerships, is that moments of peak emotional activation, like, don't let people sleep immediately afterwards. Like, after a major stressful event, trauma is just like super high stress levels. I mean, there's a whole way that trauma works, but which I can explain. But basically, when a person has a peak stressful event where their nervous system goes into full-blown overwhelm, especially if you've got physiological signs like shaking and dilating pupils and cold fingers and all that kind of stuff. If you have any of the physiological threat responses come online and that person is like super stressed and emotionally peaked out, overwhelmed, don't let them sleep. Like that is the time for partner, friend, baby, parent, whoever, is that after they come back down from the peaks of dysregulation, you want to just envelop them with wanted, chosen, and prioritized. You want to envelop them with attunement, safety, support while dysregulated, express delight, autonomy. These are the 5 pillars of attachment. So you envelop them with all these good things, and then their nervous system is like, oh, like that really sucked. That, getting run over by a bike, or which, just happened to me, or the chocolate pudding, or, someone leaving me, or blah, 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 whatever the stressful thing is. It's like, that sucked, but it's not a reality. It's not an aspect of my reality. It is just one event that happened in this larger picture of support, community, development, attunement, all the good things, right? But if they go to sleep right after that, especially if their nervous system is super activated, then all that encoding stuff happens.
Gets integrated.
Yeah.
Gets encoded. Now I'm curious, because when we're talking about this like this, again, it's very logical. It makes a lot of sense, right? Maybe it's not something that I was familiar with, but if I look at it, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
But chances are that my partner and I might, be the reason each other's nervous systems are peaking, and we're so stressed, right? Maybe we have a big argument. We come home from a party and you said something, I did one thing, whatever.
Right.
We're now fighting.
Right.
And you know how it is in those moments when you're super stressed yourself, you're not super rational. So it's very difficult to kind of take a step back and be rational and say things that are rational. And even if you would be so emotionally attuned that you're able to do that, your partner might not be able to reciprocate, right? So
what do we do?
What do we do?
Exactly. Why the fuck is anybody teaching this? It's super logical and it makes sense. When you go to the gym, do you go pick up the heaviest weight in the gym? Like, let's say you haven't been to the gym in 3 years and you go to the beginning. You don't pick up the heaviest weight and be like, I'm going to be Mr. Olympus, right? You say, oh, that's more than my capacity. Okay, now what's this one? You're like, this one's too easy. This is boring. Okay, I can do 20 reps with this one. I can only 3 reps with this one. I can only maybe do 1 or 2 reps with this one. That's where we work, right? Every personal trainer is going to tell you that. That you can either go hundreds of reps with the lightweight, which builds a certain type of resilience, but we can do small number of reps with a basically max, right? Your system, the extent of your strength, which is the extent of your capacity, which is the extent of the muscle cells inside your arms, right? Or legs or whatever. So what do? We go to the gym, we lift to the point that it exceeds our capacity, and what happens? It tears apart our muscle tissue. It creates all thousands and millions of these little tiny micro traumas, right? We're literally traumatizing the cells.
Yeah.
Then what happens? We leave the place of stress and go into a place of rest to allow the organic system to funnel material to that area to basically rebuild, reorganize, and then, recuperate. That's why we don't train every day, right? How long does it take when if you lift, you go arm day, right? You tear up your arms. You go home, they say, oh, you should wait 24 hours. Well, there's a bunch of people that said, it might actually be longer than that. Like depending upon your capacity level, the 4-hour body guy, Tim Ferriss. It's just like his protocol got to the point where you're only doing arm day like once a month or something, like because you're going hard, super, super hard. And then you come back and then you give it, 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks plus 3 days or whatever the hell it is. Okay, now let's take that whole model and we put it in the emotional sphere. You come back from the party, partner said this, I said this, we're now fighting. Oh my God, how could you do this, right? I don't have the wherewithal to ask myself, why does this bother me so much? What am I so damn afraid of?
Yeah.
Right? What do I care about? Like, what do I think is happening, right? So I don't have that ability yet. We'll get there later. But now I'm in a moment where my nervous system's peaked out, right? I have my subconscious has detected some kind of threat with whatever it is my partner did, threat of disconnection, threat of social embarrassment, or whatever. Like there's all these various angles that our system will react to. And it's like, okay, that's game day. You're now in a race. You are in a competition and you got to cross the finish line. How much training did you do for that competition? None. That's the issue. That's the issue that I figured out along the way with my own stuff. So it was like I was going into these situations where like all this crazy crazy angles of life are happening simultaneously, and then I'm completely overwhelmed. Of course I'm overwhelmed.
Yeah.
I just tried to go run a marathon with zero training or lift the biggest weight or whatever. So it's like, oh, well, that tells us pretty easily, this is how you do it. You say, hey, I had this kind of conflict with my partner. I have had this kind of conflict with my partner over these issues 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 times. Obviously, we've got something here. I need to go to my gym and practice. I need to build my capacity day after day after day. I have to go take myself to the point where I am super triggered and then deal with my whole physiology and mind in that state so that it becomes normalized to the point that I can handle it. And then I push myself further. And then I push myself further, lifting bigger and bigger weights as you go. This is exposure therapy. It's just attachment-oriented exposure therapy.
Yeah. It sounds like there's really two parts to this. Like one, that this fight with my partner on the back of the party is again a symptom, right?
Yeah.
Something happened, obviously, and this is, in regard or relating to some underlying attachment issue or fear or whatever. And that fight is just a symptom.
Yeah.
But the underlying issue is a deeper wound that we need to heal. So I feel like, and maybe that's actually a good opportunity to bring us a little bit full circle as we bring this slowly to a close. In the beginning, I asked the question, why bother in a relationship, right?
Right.
So, because, we have all of these issues, and it's difficult to process and heal while we're in it. But maybe, would you say that a relationship can also be a great help because maybe you need someone to trigger those wounds to understand, oh, we've had this fight 1, 2, 3, 4 too many times. Maybe there is something here, because if I'm not in a relationship, if I'm not in a state of discomfort, if I'm just seeking the sound healing and psilocybin trips and all of the, good feel moments, those things will never be triggered. So maybe the question, why bother with a relationship, is, well, because that's you can't just run away and only look for positive emotions in your life. Maybe you need to also expose yourself to the option that, as you said, let's label this as, an objectively and negative experience. And you need to expose yourself to those in order to feel or to understand what's inside of you that needs healing.
Right. Otherwise, you'll spend your whole life running.
Exactly.
I mean, it's like we learn it from an early age, at least we do in the West. And I think we have so many social messages that come into our mind that say, yeah, you should be running from negative experiences. It blows my mind how much messaging I got from the adults around me my entire childhood. There was like, if you feel stressed or you feel angry or you feel whatever, it's like you're fully justified in running away from it or smashing it to bits. And at no point was this message brought in. At no point was the message introduced or the idea introduced that maybe there's another way. Maybe we could just figure out why we feel so uncomfortable about it.
Yeah.
And as you're saying, relationships, attachment theory is not just about relationships. It's about this inner system we have that I call the master index of threat and safety. It's just that relationships are the clearest, most direct way of accessing that aspect of you. So the quickest way to get you triggered is to put you in a place where you have a close attachment bond and then put that bond in jeopardy. That's the quickest, strongest, fiercest way to get most people triggered. Well, why would we do that? It's like because those triggers show us what your nervous system is terrified of. What your nervous system is terrified of will have an entire assembly of coping mechanisms and numbing strategies wrapped around it. And those are the things that are ruining your life.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, these are all connected. We're using the relationship to expose the triggers. The triggers expose the fears expose your maladaptive survival strategies. Those maladaptive survival strategies are what is making you drink or give up on your job or be, lonely or, putting things off too much and, wasting your time, spending too much time watching Netflix, whatever it is. Whatever aspect of your life you're displeased with, it is happening because you've got a strategy that motivates you to pursue that line of action. That strategy is motivated by fears. How do we find the fears? You can't. When you're sitting at home, vegging out on Netflix, and we say, what are you terrified of? You're like, I'm not terrified of anything. Right? I'm just watching British sitcoms. You're like, okay, that's what you think. Let's go investigate. Sometimes that will be true. Most of the time it won't. Right? So yes, relationships are fantastic at cracking us open, peeling off all the layers of kind of bullshit and distraction. And then we realize that it's just like, I'm a scared little child inside. And that scared little child, that scared little version of me is doing all sorts of things that are super cringeworthy, that do not align with my values. They don't get me to where I want to go. Oh, look, this mechanism, this response that I've been doing for decades, I now realize is super manipulative and totally asshole-ish. And now I've got all this shame that's activating in response to that. It's like, oh my God, this is overwhelming. Oh, now we're back to numbing again. So it's understanding how all these things fire off and they trigger each other. And then as we begin unwinding it and we pick apart and do this training routine on each of those individually, one at a time, you start to unwind the whole knot. And as the knot unwinds, the person feels like they have agency over their life.
And then hopefully they'll be able to live a relationship if they want to. That also makes them feel good, right? So we don't just label relationships as like, they're only there to break everything apart.
No. I mean, it's I talk all this theory all the time and I get in it and I try to acknowledge that so much of this stuff is theoretical. But then, of course, as we mentioned earlier, I'm coming up on 1,000 clients since I started doing this. And the proof's in the pudding. It's like I've got all these people that have There's people that listen and they say, okay, yeah, blah, 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 whatever, right? And they kind of bounce off and they go do whatever, and they have a couple of insights. There are other people that follow the protocol meticulously, and those people 6 months, 9 months later are saying, I would never have chosen this person or this relationship before I started doing this work. And now I'm here and I'm in this relationship and I'm the happiest I've ever been. Because it's like, it's not that it's easy or flawless. It's that it is smooth, and ruptures happen. Ruptures always happen. Oh yeah, I definitely got to say this one because I love it. Is that the measure of a relationship is not the good times. Anybody can have happy, fancy, good sex, romantic outings, whatever. Anybody can do that.
Yeah.
The measure of relationship is what happens in the worst of times. So you have a major rupture, you have the big fight, and then it's like, what happens? And if both people are like, we're having a big fight again, this is something about me. Hey, sweetie, I need to take some time to figure out what the hell's going on inside me. And you go do that, and she does that too. And then you come back together and be like, and you hash it all out. And then you have this repair process, and then you're back together. And that whole process takes like 30 minutes. You know, earlier you were talking about like raging out and being stuck with it for 4 hours. I've been there. I've had fights with a partner that lasted weeks, months, maybe years. And then I've also been in situations where it's a relationship that is extremely healthy. It's not the most exciting thing in the world, but it's like healthy and mutually nurturing, and ruptures happen. You know how long repair takes? Usually less than an hour. Because we've figured that out. And it's not that stuff is being suppressed. It's that it's like we see the signs of our own nervous system acting out. And I'm very in tune with my own nervous system now. I was not for decades. But now I'm very in tune with my nervous system. I'm like, ooh, my nervous system is really unhappy about what's happening right here. This is not about you. Hey, sweetie, partner, whatever. It's just like, my nervous system is raging, and it is pouring all this crap into the space between us, and that's not what I want. So I need to pull away and deal with my own stuff for a while. Is that cool with you? It's like, yes, please go do it. And then you come together, and then it's like, now you've got this system that they call it anti-fragile. I forget the author of that book. I was trying to tip my tongue. Taleb. Anyway. The anti-fragile system is a system that gets stronger every time it is taxed. And healthy organic systems are anti-fragile. A healthy relationship is anti-fragile. It will actually get stronger each time there's a rupture and repair. It will come back stronger than it was before. Okay, now you've got this relationship that keeps getting stronger, more deep, more intimate, more vulnerable, more expansive. And okay, why? Well, turns out, if I've got this other person next to me, I stand higher than I did without them. I'm able to reach higher. I'm able to pursue bigger dreams, chase bigger intentions, take on bigger tasks. I'm able to intentionally take on a task that I know will take me to my limit. This one is going to tap me out to zero. And I know that I can do that because when I tap out to zero, and I've run it by my partner ahead of time, I'm going to go do this thing that's going to tap me out to zero. She's like, go for it. I go tap myself out to zero. I come home, I flop down on the couch, and it's like, oh my God, I've got nothing left. And then partner shows up and it's like, oh, here's your tea. I'm going to rub your feet. I'm going to like, don't worry about it. I'll take care of dinner. And it's like, oh my God, that allowed me to push myself to my limit and still be in a safe place. What have we learned about pushing ourselves to our limit? Every time you push yourself to a limit and you have safety afterwards, your limit increases. Mm-hmm. So now we've got this, it's like a mathematical formula that the healthy relationship allows both people to grow bigger, almost exponentially. That's why you have relationships. Healthy ones anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a beautiful place to leave it on. I don't think anything else I would say at this point could add to it. One thing I feel like I wanted to add at the end of a podcast is ask you so now we're halfway through the year actually.
Yeah.
What is one thing you learned this year for you? You know, maybe within. It doesn't even have to be within this concept, but I'm curious. Like, what is something new that you've learned in 2026 that you've realized is something, yeah, that you haven't considered in this sense in your life yet?
Well, I learned, as you know, I was in a vehicle accident in November, and it took about 5 months for my leg to heal. So I learned a lot of stuff about wound care, and the capacities of the body. That was really miraculous. So that's a neat one. That one's definitely in the running, but that's not the answer I'm going to give you. The answer I'm going to give you is from the retreat that I just ran a couple weeks ago, and we had like 8 people total, and it was the first time I'd done it, and there's a lot of moving parts, right? And one of my big takeaways from that retreat is that the kind of hot box intensive is more effective than multiple sessions. And what I'm saying there is that some of these people I'd worked with one-on-one before, some I hadn't, but like the amount of progress we saw, like measurable, meaningful change, like the kind of thing that like if you did a video of the person before and after, you'd be like, is that even the same person, right? That kind of change we saw in 6 days. Really 5, because the 6th day was really just checking out. So 5 days of work, and we saw these massive transformations in people. And I was like, I don't think I would have been able to achieve that with 10 one-on-one sessions over a Zoom meeting or whatever. And I was like, and it's a combination of multiple people all moving through the process together, and this thing where it's like each day is intense, and then they go and rest and digest and sleep, and then come back and the next day and they do it again. And it's like, I was really, I mean, I've done this a lot with a lot of people in a lot of different ways, but that was the most stunning thing I've seen since I started doing this.
Brilliant. Well, I hope the future retreats that you're organizing will have
I hope so too.
similar effects
Yeah.
and impacts on you as well as your participants.
Yeah, me too.
But yeah, I think that's a great way to bring this to a close, Kirby. Thank you so
Flo.
much for
Thank you.
joining. I love this conversation.
Me too. That was great.
And yeah, I'll bring this to a close. As always, I recommend you to follow your intuition, do everything with love, and just see where it takes you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Awesome.